The blood-red sunset cast long shadows across Willow Creek's main street, as Flora Adams ran her fingers over the hidden marks on her cheek, wincing at the tenderness beneath the powder. She'd perfected the art of concealment over the last 3 years of marriage, but tonight's bruises would require extra attention if she hoped to sell her paintings at tomorrow's town gathering without raising suspicions. Montana Territory, 1878. Flora had once dreamed of becoming a celebrated artist in the East. Now, at 24, she found herself trapped in a remote frontier town, married to the town's most prosperous businessman and its most dangerous drunk. Her paintings, once vibrant with color and life, had become both her salvation and her secret means of saving for an escape that seemed increasingly impossible. Another layer should hide it, she whispered to herself, applying more powder to the darkening area below her right eye. The small mirror in her painting studio, a converted shed behind their house, reflected a woman barely recognizable to herself anymore. Her auburn hair was pulled back severely, her green eyes dulled by years of fear. The studio door creaked open without warning, sending her heart racing until she recognized the familiar silhouette of her only friend in town. "Land's sake, Flora, what happened this time?" Martha Wilson gasped, hurrying across the small space to examine Flora's face more closely. "It's nothing," Flora replied automatically, turning away. "William was upset about dinner being late." Martha's weathered face crumpled with concern. "This isn't nothing. You can't keep living like this." "I don't have a choice," Flora said, carefully arranging her paintings for tomorrow's display. Landscapes, mostly the rolling hills surrounding Willow Creek, the mountains in the distance, the creek itself winding through golden meadows. She'd sold 3 last month, the money hidden beneath a loose floorboard in her studio. "There's always a choice," Martha insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. They both knew the reality of a woman's position in these parts. Without family, without means, Flora was as trapped as the butterflies William liked to collect and pin to display boards. "He's leaving for Helena tomorrow," Flora said, allowing a small spark of hope to flicker. "Business with the railroad. He'll be gone for at least 2 weeks." Martha squeezed her shoulder gently. "That's something, at least. You'll sell plenty tomorrow. Your work gets better every time. I've never seen someone capture the territory's light the way you do." After Martha left, Flora worked well into the night, finishing her newest piece, a sunset over the distant mountains that somehow captured both the beauty and isolation of Montana Territory. When she finally returned to the main house, William was passed out in his study, an empty whiskey bottle on the floor beside him. Flora slipped quietly upstairs, packing a small bag of essentials. 2 weeks might give her enough time to sell more paintings, add to her savings, and finally implement the escape plan she'd been crafting for months. She'd heard of a women's art collective in San Francisco. Far enough away that William couldn't find her, but close enough that she might actually reach it with her limited funds. Morning arrived with a clarity that seemed to mock Flora's bruised face. She applied her cosmetics carefully, wincing at each touch of the brush against her tender skin. The town gathering would start at noon, and William would leave for Helena before then. Just a few more hours of caution and then temporary freedom. "I expect you to behave appropriately while I'm gone," William said over breakfast, his voice carrying the false pleasantness he used in public. "No embarrassing me in front of the townspeople." "Of course not," Flora answered, eyes downcast. "I hope your business goes well." He reached across the table suddenly, gripping her wrist hard enough to leave marks. "And don't think I don't know about your little painting sales." "Whatever you earn belongs in this household." Flora's heart sank. Had he found her hidden savings? "I only sell them to bring honor to your name," she lied smoothly. "Everyone compliments the talent of Mrs. William Adams." His grip relaxed slightly, pride temporarily overtaking suspicion. "See that it stays that way." By mid-morning, William had departed on the stagecoach, and Flora was arranging her paintings under the canvas awning Martha had helped her set up in the town square. Other vendors were similarly preparing for the gathering, a celebration of the town's founding 5 years earlier. "These are mighty fine, Mrs. Adams," Sheriff Patterson commented, stopping to admire her display. That sunset looks real enough to warm your face. Thank you, Sheriff, Flora replied, adjusting the high collar of her dress to ensure no bruises showed. Will you and Mrs. Patterson be attending the dance tonight? Wouldn't miss it, he replied, tipping his hat before moving on. Flora watched him go with a mixture of resentment and resignation. Everyone in town knew what William did to her. No one intervened. A man's home was his castle, and what happened inside was his business alone, even if that business included treating his wife like property to be damaged at will. By early afternoon, the gathering was in full swing. Flora had sold 2 small landscapes to the banker's wife and was discussing a larger commission with the new schoolteacher when she noticed a stranger watching her from across the square. He stood apart from the crowds, leaning against a hitching post with casual confidence. Tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair visible beneath his wide-brimmed hat. Unlike the businessmen of Willow Creek, he wore the practical clothing of a working cowboy, dust-covered boots, worn denim, and a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms. When their eyes met, he didn't look away as most men would upon being caught staring. Instead, he nodded slightly, a gesture both respectful and somehow intimate. Flora quickly returned her attention to the schoolteacher, ignoring the unexpected flutter in her chest. I can have it completed before the harvest festival, she was saying when a shadow fell across her display. Pardon me, madam, said a deep voice with a slight Texas drawl. I couldn't help admiring your work. Flora looked up into the most startlingly blue eyes she'd ever seen. The stranger from across the square stood before her, hat now in hand, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the collar. Thank you, mister, Flora replied, her professional smile firmly in place. Quinn, Caleb Quinn, he answered, extending a calloused hand. Just arrived in town yesterday. Flora Adams, she responded, briefly touching his hand. Are you passing through or staying in Willow Creek? Staying for a spell. Took a job with the Henderson Ranch outside town. His gaze moved from her paintings to her face, lingering a moment too long. You've got a real gift for capturing light. Despite herself, Flora felt warmth rise to her cheeks. That's kind of you to say. Not kindness, madam, just truth. He picked up a small painting of the creek at dawn, morning mist rising from the water. How much for this one? She named a price, and he paid without hesitation, though she suspected the amount represented a significant portion of her ranch hand's monthly wages. Will you be at the dance tonight? He asked, carefully wrapping the purchased painting in paper. I will, she answered, then added quickly, my husband is away on business, but I wouldn't miss the celebration. Something flickered in his eyes, understanding, perhaps, or disappointment. Then perhaps you'll save a dance for a newcomer. Help make me welcome in Willow Creek. Before Flora could respond, Martha appeared at her side. Flora, dear, you must come see the quilts on display. Mrs. Thompson has outdone herself this year. With a polite nod to Caleb Quinn, Flora allowed herself to be led away, but not before noticing how his gaze followed her through the crowd. Who is that man? Martha asked once they were out of earshot. New ranch hand at Henderson's place, Flora replied, trying to sound casual. He bought the creek painting. Martha raised an eyebrow. He wasn't looking at your paintings the way most customers do. It doesn't matter how he was looking, Flora said firmly. I'm a married woman. A married woman with a plan to not be married much longer, if I recall correctly, Martha whispered. And William's gone for 2 weeks. Martha Wilson, I'm trying to escape a bad marriage, not jump into another complicated situation. Martha patted her hand sympathetically. Of course, dear. I just haven't seen that color in your cheeks in a long while. It's nice to see, is all. By evening, Flora had sold 5 paintings and accepted 2 commissions, her most successful day yet. As she packed up her remaining work, she calculated the additions to her escape fund with cautious optimism. Another day like today, and she might have enough to leave before William returned. The town hall had been transformed for the dance, with lanterns hanging from the rafters and wildflowers decorating every available surface. Flora had changed into her best dress, a deep green that matched her eyes, and arranged her hair to fall softly around her face. partially concealing the marks that even the best powder couldn't completely hide. She sat with Martha and a group of other women, watching as couples swirled around the dance floor. The band played a lively reel, and the sheriff's booming laugh occasionally rose above the music. For a moment, Flora allowed herself to enjoy the scene, to pretend she was just another townswoman enjoying the celebration. "Mrs. Adams," came that now familiar Texas drawl. "I believe you promised me a dance." Flora looked up to find Caleb Quinn standing before her, hand extended. She hadn't actually promised anything of the sort, but found herself rising from her chair nonetheless. "Just one dance," she said, ignoring Martha's knowing smile. His hand was warm as it closed around hers, leading her to the dance floor just as the band began a slower waltz. When his other hand settled respectfully at her waist, Flora realized it had been years since she'd been touched with such care. "You dance very well for a ranch hand, Mr. Quinn," she observed as he guided her smoothly through the steps. A smile tugged at his lips. "My mother insisted all her sons learn, said we'd thank her one day." "And do you thank her?" "I do now," he replied, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her look away. They danced in silence for several moments, Flora acutely aware of the way his hand rested at her waist, the slight pressure of his fingers against hers, the faint scent of leather and open air that clung to him. "What brings you to Willow Creek, Mr. Quinn?" she asked, needing to break the silence that felt too comfortable, too dangerous. "Work, primarily, and a change of scenery." His gaze traveled over her face again, lingering on her cheek where she knew the bruise was visible despite her efforts. Sometimes a person needs to start fresh. Flora felt exposed suddenly, as if he could see through her careful facade to the desperate plans beneath. "Yes," she agreed quietly. "Sometimes they do." The dance ended, but he didn't immediately release her hand. "Would you walk with me for a moment, get some air?" Every sensible part of her knew she should decline. Yet she found herself nodding, following him through the open doors onto the town hall's wide porch. The night air was cool, stars emerging in a sky still tinged with the last purple light of sunset. They stood side by side at the porch railing, looking out over the darkened Main Street. Music and laughter drifted through the open doors behind them. "Your husband," Caleb said after a moment, his voice gentle but direct. "He's the one who gave you those bruises." It wasn't a question. Flora's hand instinctively rose to her cheek before she could stop herself. "I don't know what you're talking about." Caleb turned to face her, his expression grave. "You don't have to hide it, Mrs. Adams, not from me." The simple statement, spoken without judgment or pity, cracked something inside her. For 3 years, everyone in town had pretended not to notice, had looked the other way, had treated William's abuse as an unfortunate but private matter. "How did you know?" she whispered. "I recognized the signs," he answered, his eyes shadowed with old pain. "My father was the same way with my mother. For years, we all lived in fear of his moods, his fists." "I'm sorry," Flora said, meaning it. "What happened?" "My oldest brother finally stood up to him when I was 12. Got beaten half to death for it, but it changed something. After that, we all learned to fight back. Eventually, my father left or was driven away, depending on who tells the story." "Is that why you approached me today?" Flora asked, suddenly suspicious. "Out of some misplaced need to save another victim?" "No, madam," Caleb replied honestly. "I approached you because your paintings captured something I've been chasing my whole life, a kind of beauty that exists alongside pain. Only later did I recognize what you were hiding beneath that powder." Flora was silent, unsure how to respond to such unexpected candor. "I'm leaving him," she said finally, the first time she'd spoken the words aloud to anyone besides Martha. "While he's away, I've been saving money from my paintings." Caleb nodded slowly. "Where will you go?" "San Francisco. There's a women's art collective there. I've been corresponding with them." "That's a long journey for a woman alone," Flora stiffened. "I don't have many alternatives, Mr. Quinn." "I didn't mean to suggest you couldn't do it," he clarified. "Only that it might be safer not to travel alone." Before she could respond, Martha appeared in the doorway. "Flora, dear, everyone's asking for you. Mrs. Henderson wants to discuss a commission." With a quick glance at Caleb, Flora followed Martha back inside, her mind racing with the implications of their conversation. She spent the remainder of the evening moving from group to group, discussing her art, accepting compliments, and avoiding the sheriff's knowing gaze when he asked after William. Caleb Quinn kept his distance, but Flora felt his eyes on her throughout the night, not predatory or judgmental, but watchful, concerned. When she finally prepared to leave, he appeared at her side once more. "May I walk you home, Mrs. Adams?" he asked quietly. "That's not necessary," she began, but Martha interrupted. "Of course it is. It's dark and it's a good 10-minute walk to your place. Mr. Quinn, I'd be much obliged if you'd ensure my friend gets home safely." Before Flora could protest further, Martha had gathered her shawl and practically pushed the two of them out the door. They walked in silence down the main street, past darkened storefronts and the still-lit windows of the saloon. The night had grown cooler and Flora pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Your friend is quite determined," Caleb observed, amusement coloring his voice. "Martha means well," Flora replied. "She's been my only ally here." "She knows about your plans," Flora nodded. "She's been helping me save, selling my paintings to travelers passing through when I couldn't attend market days." They reached the edge of town, where the houses grew further apart. Flora's home, William's home, stood on a small rise, larger and more imposing than the surrounding dwellings. The windows were dark, emphasizing its emptiness. "That's a big house for two people," Caleb remarked as they approached. "William likes to display his success," Flora said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "It's never felt like home to me." They stopped at the garden gate, neither making a move to open it. The house loomed beyond, dark and uninviting. "When do you plan to leave?" Caleb asked. "As soon as I have enough money. A few more sales should do it." Flora hesitated, then added, "I'd appreciate your discretion, Mr. Quinn. If word got back to William somehow." "Your secret is safe with me," he assured her. Then, more carefully, "I ride into Helena twice a week with deliveries from the Henderson Ranch, if you needed transportation part of the way." The offer hung in the air between them, unexpected and tempting. Flora studied his face in the moonlight, trying to discern his motives. "Why would you help me?" she asked finally. "You don't know me." "Sometimes people recognize something in each other," he answered simply. "Something familiar." Flora thought about his story, about a family that had suffered under a violent man, about children who had eventually found the courage to stand up, to drive away their tormentor. Perhaps in her, Caleb Quinn saw his mother someone who needed the help his mother had never received. "I'll consider it," she said, opening the gate at last. "Thank you for walking me home, Mr. Quinn." "Caleb," he corrected gently. "My friends call me Caleb." "Good night, Caleb," Flora said, allowing herself a small smile before turning toward the dark house. "Mrs. Adams," he called softly when she reached the porch. "Flora," she turned back, surprised at the sound of her given name. "You don't deserve what he's done to you," Caleb said, his expression intense even in the darkness. "No one does." With that, he tipped his hat and walked away, his figure gradually disappearing into the night. Flora stood on the porch long after he'd gone, feeling something unfamiliar stirring in her chest, not hope exactly, but perhaps its precursor. A sense that another life might be possible after all. The empty house welcomed her with familiar silence. Without William's presence, the rooms seemed to exhale, to expand. Flora moved through them like a ghost, lighting a single lamp in the kitchen where she made herself a cup of tea. Her thoughts returned again and again to Caleb Quinn, to the offer of help, to the understanding in his eyes when he'd recognized her bruises. It was dangerous to trust a stranger, a man she'd just met. Yet something about him inspired confidence. Perhaps it was the way he'd spoken of his father, the shadows in his eyes when he mentioned his mother. Or perhaps it was simply that he'd truly seen her when everyone else in town had been carefully looking away for years. Flora slept poorly that night, dreams filled with running, with stage coaches and train stations, with William's rage and Caleb's steady gaze. Morning found her exhausted but resolute. She would sell enough paintings to secure her escape. Whether she accepted Caleb's help remained to be seen. The next week passed in a blur of activity. Flora painted from dawn until dusk, producing new works at a pace she'd never managed before. Martha arranged for her to display her paintings at the hotel where travelers often stopped on their way to or from Helena. Sales were steady, her hidden savings growing with each transaction. Caleb Quinn visited the hotel display twice, purchasing a small landscape each time. Their interactions remained brief, public, but weighted with unspoken understanding. He never pressed her about his offer of help, never mentioned their conversation on the night of the dance. Yet Flora found herself watching for him, her heart beating faster when he appeared. On the 8th day of William's absence, disaster struck. Flora returned home from the hotel to find the front door ajar. Inside, William's study had been ransacked, drawers pulled open, papers scattered across the floor. With mounting dread, she ran to her studio. The loose floorboard had been pried up, the cavity beneath empty. Her savings, nearly 2 years' worth of careful accumulation, gone. On her easel, someone had slashed her latest painting, a vicious X carved through the canvas. Flora sank to her knees, a sob rising in her throat. Who would do this? Who even knew about her hidden money besides Martha? A note lay on her work table, the paper expensive, the handwriting familiar. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? I'll be home in 3 days. Pray I'm in a forgiving mood. Terror washed over her in a cold wave. William knew. Somehow he'd discovered her plans, or at least suspected enough to search for hidden money. And now he was coming back, his rage amplified by her betrayal. Flora's mind raced. 3 days. She had 3 days to either escape or face a punishment that would likely be worse than anything she'd endured before. But without her savings, where could she go? How far could she get? She was still sitting on the studio floor when a knock came at the door. Flora froze, irrationally afraid William had returned early. When the knock came again, followed by Martha's voice calling her name, she exhaled shakily. "Oh, my dear girl," Martha gasped when she saw Flora's tear-streaked face and the destruction around her. "What happened?" Flora wordlessly handed her the note. Martha read it, her expression hardening with each word. "That monster," she whispered. "How did he find out?" "I don't know," Flora replied, her voice hollow. "But he found everything. All the money is gone." Martha helped her to her feet, guiding her to a chair. "Then you'll have to leave now without it. I have some savings. I can't take your money, Martha. You can and you will. It won't be enough for San Francisco, but it might get you to Denver. You have cousins there, don't you?" "Second cousins I haven't seen since I was a child. They might not even remember me." "Family is family," Martha insisted. "And even if they turn you away, Denver's a big city. You could find work, sell your paintings." Flora looked around at her slashed canvas, her empty hiding place. "He won't let me go," she said quietly. "He'll come after me." "Not if he doesn't know where you've gone." Martha gripped her hands tightly. "Listen to me, Flora. Tomorrow morning, I'll tell everyone who will listen that you've gone to visit your sick aunt in Bozeman. William will believe it because it's common knowledge your mother's sister lives there." "I don't have an aunt in Bozeman." "William doesn't know that. He's never shown any interest in your family. Meanwhile, you'll be on your way to Denver." Hope flickered briefly, then died. "How?" "The stagecoach doesn't come through until Friday, the day William returns, and I can't afford a private coach." Martha hesitated. "What about Mr. Quinn? He offered to help, didn't he?" Flora shook her head. "I can't involve him in this. William is dangerous when he's angry." "More dangerous than what you'll face if you're still here when he returns," Martha countered. "At least talk to Mr. Quinn, see if he can get you to Helena. From there, you can take the train." After Martha left, Flora packed what little she could carry: a change of clothes, her mother's locket, her best brushes, and a small set of paints. Everything else she would have to leave behind. The thought of abandoning her paintings, her books, the few possessions that had brought her comfort over the years, brought fresh tears to her eyes, but the alternative was unthinkable. If William truly knew she'd been planning to leave him, his rage would know no bounds. The bruises he'd given her in the past would be nothing compared to what awaited her if she stayed. Decision made, Flora cleaned up the destruction in her studio as best she could, then walked to the Henderson Ranch as twilight settled over the valley. She'd never visited before, but everyone in town knew the sprawling property that supplied beef to much of the territory. The foreman directed her to the bunkhouse. his eyebrows raised at the unusual sight of William Adams' wife requesting to speak with a ranch hand. Flora waited outside, heart pounding, rehearsing what she would say. Caleb emerged, surprise evident on his face when he saw her. He'd clearly just washed up after a day's work, his hair damp, his clean shirt partially unbuttoned. "Mrs. Adams," he said, quickly fastening another button. "Is everything all right?" "No," she answered honestly. "Could we speak privately?" He led her away from the bunkhouse to a small bench beneath an oak tree. In the fading light, his expression was difficult to read. "William knows," Flora said without preamble. "He found my savings, destroyed my studio. He's coming back in 3 days." Caleb was silent for a moment, processing. "Are you hurt?" "No, he wasn't there, just left a note." Flora took a deep breath. "Your offer to help me get to Helena, does it still stand?" "Of course," he replied without hesitation. "When do you want to leave?" "Tomorrow, the sooner the better." Caleb nodded thoughtfully. "I'm scheduled to make a delivery to Helena the day after tomorrow, but I can speak to the foreman, arrange to go tomorrow instead." Relief washed over Flora. "Thank you, I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "There's nothing to repay," he said firmly. "Where will you go from Helena?" "Denver, I think. I have distant family there." A shadow crossed his face, quickly suppressed. "That's good, family can be important. You disapprove?" Flora asked, noticing his expression. "It's not my place to approve or disapprove," Caleb replied carefully. "I just want to make sure you're safe. Denver is far, but maybe not far enough if your husband is determined to find you." The thought sent a chill through her. "I don't have many options." Caleb was quiet for a moment, seemingly wrestling with a decision. "I have a sister in San Francisco," he said finally. "She's married to a gallery owner, if that's where you really want to go." Hope flared in Flora's chest. "You'd help me get all the way to San Francisco." "I could do better than that. I could introduce you to my sister and her husband. They could help you connect with that artists' collective you mentioned." It seemed too perfect, too convenient. Flora studied his face in the deepening twilight. "Why would you do that for me?" "We barely know each other." Caleb met her gaze steadily. "Because I recognize something in you, strength you perhaps don't even see in yourself, and because no one should have to live in fear." There was more, Flora sensed, something he wasn't saying. But his offer represented everything she'd been working toward: San Francisco, connections in the art world, a true escape. "If I accept your help," she said carefully, "I need to be clear about something I'm not looking for. That is, I'm not expecting. I'm offering help, Mrs. Adams. Nothing more, nothing less." His voice was gentle but firm. "Whatever you're thinking, whatever you're worried about, I assure you my intentions are honorable." Flora believed him, though she couldn't have explained why. Perhaps it was the way he held himself slightly apart from her, respectful of her space. Or perhaps it was the absence of expectation in his eyes, so different from William's perpetual demands. "Then I accept," she said, extending her hand as if to seal a business arrangement. "And please call me Flora." His large hand enveloped hers, warm and calloused. "Meet me at the crossroads east of town at dawn," he instructed. "Bring only what you can carry, I'll handle the rest." As she turned to leave, Caleb added, "Flora, I know this is frightening. But you're doing the right thing." She nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and hurried away into the gathering darkness. Back at the house, Flora spent a sleepless night making final preparations. She wrote a brief letter to Martha, explaining her plans and expressing her gratitude for years of friendship. She packed and repacked her small bag, agonizing over each item included or left behind. In her studio, she selected 3 small canvases, her best work, wrapping them carefully in cloth. She would need something to show the gallery owner in San Francisco, something to prove her talent. As the first gray light of dawn crept through her window, Flora donned her simplest traveling dress and wrapped a shawl around her shoulders. With one final glance at the house that had been her prison for 3 years, she slipped out the back door and hurried through the sleeping town toward the eastern crossroads. Caleb was waiting, as promised, with 2 horses his own and a gentle-looking mare. He wore a duster over his regular clothes, and his hat was pulled low against the morning chill. "Ready?" he asked simply as Flora approached. She nodded, suddenly unable to speak past the lump in her throat. This was it, the moment she'd been planning for so long. Once she mounted that horse, there would be no turning back. Caleb seemed to understand her hesitation. "It's okay to be scared," he said quietly. "Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting in spite of it." Flora took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I'm ready." He helped her mount, his hands respectful as he adjusted her stirrups. Once she was settled, he swung up onto his own horse with practiced ease. "We'll ride east for a few hours, then cut north toward Helena," he explained. "Should reach the city by tomorrow afternoon if all goes well." As they rode away from Willow Creek, Flora felt something loosen in her chest, a tightness she'd carried for so long she'd forgotten what it was like to breathe freely. Behind them, the town slumbered, unaware that one of its residents was making her escape. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, but also possibility. They rode in companionable silence as the sun rose higher, bathing the landscape in golden light. Occasionally, Caleb would point out landmarks or wildlife, but mostly he gave Flora space with her thoughts. By midday, they stopped to rest the horses and eat a simple meal Caleb had packed. Sitting on a fallen log beside a small creek, Flora found herself studying her companion as he checked the horse's hooves. There was an ease to his movements, a quiet confidence that reminded her of the way he danced assured but never domineering. So different from William, whose every gesture was designed to command attention, to assert control. "May I ask you something?" Flora said as Caleb rejoined her on the log. "Of course. You said you recognized something in me. What did you mean?" Caleb considered her question, taking a drink from his canteen before answering. "When I first saw you in the town square, you were talking to that schoolteacher. Your face was animated, your hands moving as you described a painting you wanted to create. There was such life in you, such passion." He paused, his eyes on the distant horizon. Then someone nearby dropped something, a crate or barrel. The sound was like a gunshot. Everyone jumped but you. You flinched in a particular way. Your hand went up, not to your heart like most people, but to your face, like you were expecting a blow. Flora remembered that moment, the instinctive reaction she couldn't control. "After that, I noticed other things," Caleb continued. "How you kept your back to walls, how your eyes constantly tracked movement around you, how your smile never quite reached your eyes." He looked at her directly. "I recognized it because I used to do the same things. So did my mother, so did my brothers and sister. It's the way people move when they're used to being hurt." The simple truth of his observation brought unexpected tears to Flora's eyes. No one had ever seen her so clearly before. "I'm sorry," Caleb said, misinterpreting her reaction. "I didn't mean to upset you." "You didn't," Flora assured him, wiping away a stray tear. "It's just strange to be understood." They resumed their journey shortly after, following game trails and old Indian paths that Caleb seemed to know well. By evening, they had traveled a considerable distance from Willow Creek, camping in a protected hollow that offered shelter from the wind and concealment from any passing travelers. As Caleb built a small fire, Flora unpacked the food Martha had insisted on sending: bread, cheese, and dried apple slices. They ate by firelight, the stars gradually appearing overhead in a vast, glittering canopy. "How long have you been planning to leave?" Caleb asked as they finished their simple meal. "Almost 2 years," Flora admitted. "At first, I just started hiding small amounts of money, not really knowing what I'd use it for. Then I heard about the Women's Art Collective in San Francisco from a traveler staying at the hotel. It seemed like a dream I could actually reach. And now you will," Caleb said with quiet certainty. "If we make it to Helena without William discovering I'm gone," Flora pointed out, "if we can secure passage on a train, if your sister and her husband are willing to help a stranger." "They will be," he assured her. "Eliza, my sister, she'll understand instantly. Her husband Thomas is a good man, they've helped others before." Something in his tone made Flora curious. "Others?" Caleb poked at the fire, sending sparks into the night air. "After what happened with our father, Eliza made it her mission to help women in difficult situations. Her husband's gallery often features female artists who might not otherwise get a chance to display their work." Flora absorbed this information, feeling another piece of the puzzle that was Caleb Quinn's slide into place. "So helping me," It's something you've done before, part of your family's mission. He looked up, something vulnerable flashing in his eyes. I've helped others reach Helena, yes. But this is different. How? Flora asked, her heart beating faster despite her resolve to remain detached. Caleb seemed to debate with himself before answering. Because I've never met anyone like you before, he said finally, his voice low. Someone who creates such beauty while living with such pain. It's humbling. The sincerity in his words caught Flora off guard. For 3 years, William had systematically diminished her, convinced her of her worthlessness. To be seen, to be valued not just as an artist, but as a person felt both foreign and exhilarating. I'm not special, she said, dropping her gaze to the fire. Just desperate. You're both, Caleb replied simply, and there's no shame in desperation when the alternative is suffering. They fell silent after that, each lost in private thoughts as the fire burned lower. Eventually, Caleb showed Flora how to make a bedroll from the blankets he'd brought, positioning hers on one side of the fire while he took the other close enough for safety, far enough for propriety. Despite the hard ground and unfamiliar surroundings, Flora slept more peacefully than she had in years, lulled by the night sounds and the steady breathing of her companion across the dying embers. Morning arrived with a thin mist clinging to the ground and the distant call of birds. Flora woke to find Caleb already up, brewing coffee over a freshly built fire. We should reach Helena by mid-afternoon, he said, handing her a steaming cup. The train to Sacramento leaves tomorrow morning. From there, it's a short journey to San Francisco. The reality of her situation struck Flora anew. I don't have enough money for a train ticket, she admitted. William took everything. I have money, Caleb said matter-of-factly, enough for your ticket. I can't accept that, Flora protested. You've already risked too much helping me. Consider it a loan, he suggested. You can repay me when you're established in San Francisco, selling paintings for more than I make in a month. His easy confidence in her abilities brought a smile to Flora's lips. You haven't even seen my best work. I don't need to. I can see your talent in everything you create. They broke camp efficiently, continuing their journey as the sun burned away the morning mist. The landscape gradually changed, the open plains giving way to more varied terrain as they approached Helena. By early afternoon, they crested a ridge that offered their first view of the city, a sprawling collection of buildings nestled in a valley, smoke rising from numerous chimneys, the metallic gleam of railroad tracks cutting through the southern edge. It's bigger than I expected, Flora remarked, momentarily overwhelmed by the sight. After years in tiny Willow Creek, Helena looked like a metropolis. It's grown a lot since they discovered gold, Caleb replied. We'll head to a boarding house run by a friend of my family. You'll be safe there tonight. As they rode into the outskirts of the city, Flora became acutely aware of her appearance travel-stained clothing, hair coming loose from its pins, and most concerning, the fading bruises still visible on her face despite her efforts with powder. Caleb seemed to read her thoughts. No one will question your appearance here, he assured her. Helena sees all types passing through. Besides, Mrs. Cooper, who runs the boarding house, she understands situations like yours. Another person who helps women escape bad marriages. Flora asked, attempting a light tone despite her nervousness. Something like that, Caleb answered, his expression unreadable. The boarding house was a tidy 3-story building on a quiet street several blocks from the main thoroughfare. A small sign proclaimed Cooper's lodging above the door, and flower boxes brightened the windows. Mrs. Cooper herself answered their knock, a tall, stern-looking woman with silver-streaked dark hair and penetrating eyes. She took in Flora's appearance with a single glance, then ushered them inside without comment. Room at the back on the 2nd floor, she told Caleb after brief introductions. No one else is staying on that floor currently. I'll bring up some hot water and food. Thank you, Margaret, Caleb replied, clearly familiar with the woman and her establishment. The room was small but spotlessly clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a chair beside a window overlooking a small garden. Flora stood awkwardly in the center, suddenly uncomfortable with the intimate setting. I'll wait downstairs while you rest and freshen up, Caleb said, seeming to sense her discomfort. We need to visit the train station before it closes to secure your ticket for tomorrow." After he left, Mrs. Cooper arrived with a tray of food and a pitcher of steaming water. She set them down, then turned to Flora with a directness that was somehow comforting in its lack of pity. "Mr. Quinn says you're heading to San Francisco," she stated. "Running from a husband, I take it." Startled by her bluntness, Flora could only nod. "Good," Mrs. Cooper said firmly. "Some men don't deserve the women they marry. I've seen too many bruises hidden under powder to think otherwise." Her expression softened slightly. "You're doing the right thing, leaving. And you're fortunate to have found a good man to help you." "I barely know him," Flora admitted. "Sometimes that's safer," Mrs. Cooper replied cryptically. "There are clean towels in the drawer. Take your time. No one will disturb you here." After the older woman left, Flora used the hot water to wash away days of travel dust. She changed into her spare dress, a simple blue cotton that had been buried at the bottom of her bag, and attempted to arrange her hair more neatly. The bruise on her cheekbone had faded to a yellowish shadow, still visible but no longer as shocking. Flora touched it gently, remembering Caleb's words, "You don't have to hide it." For the first time, she left the mark uncovered, a badge of what she'd survived rather than a shame to be concealed. When she went downstairs, she found Caleb in conversation with Mrs. Cooper in a small sitting room. Both looked up as she entered, and something in Caleb's expression, a mixture of admiration and concern, made Flora's heart beat faster. "Feeling better?" he asked, rising to his feet. "Much," she replied truthfully. The simple act of washing away the journey's grime had restored some of her confidence. "We should head to the station," Caleb suggested. "It's not far, but they close the ticket office at 5. The Helena train station bustled with activity travelers coming and going, porters handling luggage, vendors selling newspapers and snacks. Flora stayed close to Caleb, overwhelmed by the noise and movement after the quiet of their journey. At the ticket counter, Caleb purchased a one-way passage to Sacramento, connecting to San Francisco. The cost made Flora wince far more than she'd anticipated, representing what must be a significant portion of Caleb's savings. "I'll pay you back," she promised as they left the station, the precious ticket tucked safely in her pocket. "Every cent." "I know you will," Caleb replied easily, "though I'd rather you sent me a painting instead." As they walked back toward the boarding house, Flora became aware of Caleb's occasional glances at her face, specifically at her uncovered bruise. "I decided not to hide it," she explained, self-conscious under his scrutiny. "Like you said, I don't have to." Caleb's expression warmed. "It's a brave choice." "Not brave," Flora corrected. "Just tired of pretending." They stopped at a small general store where Caleb insisted on purchasing supplies for her journey: food, a warm shawl for the cooler coastal climate, and a small leather case to protect her paintings. "The train leaves at 8 tomorrow morning," he reminded her as they continued their walk. "I'll escort you to the station." "And then?" Flora asked, realizing she hadn't considered what would happen after that moment. "And then you'll be on your way to a new life," Caleb said simply. "I've written a letter to Eliza explaining everything. She'll meet you at the station in San Francisco." The finality of his words struck Flora with unexpected force. This man who had risked so much to help her would disappear from her life as suddenly as he had entered it. The thought left her with an emptiness she hadn't anticipated. "What about you?" she asked, trying to keep her voice casual. "Will you return to Willow Creek eventually? I need to collect my things from the Henderson Ranch, but I won't stay." His expression darkened. "Not once your husband realizes you're gone with my help." The reminder of William sent a chill through Flora. In the whirlwind of escape, she'd almost forgotten the danger Caleb had placed himself in by helping her. "He'll be furious," she said quietly, "if he discovers your involvement." "I can handle William Adams," Caleb stated, his tone leaving no room for doubt. They had reached the boarding house again. As they climbed the steps, Flora made a sudden decision. Would you dine with me tonight?" she asked, the request feeling bold despite its innocence. "I'd like to thank you properly for everything you've done." Surprise flickered across Caleb's features, followed by a smile that transformed his face. "I'd be honored." Mrs. Cooper directed them to a small restaurant 2 streets over, known for its privacy and good food. As they were seated at a corner table, Flora realized this was the first time she'd dined in public without William since their marriage, the first time in years she'd been able to order what she wanted, speak freely, laugh without fear of consequences. Over a simple but delicious meal of roast chicken and vegetables, Flora found herself sharing stories she'd never told anyone about her childhood in Iowa, her early passion for painting, the dreams she'd abandoned when she married William at 21. "Why did you marry him?" Caleb asked gently. "If it's not too personal a question," Flora sighed, considering how to explain a decision that now seemed incomprehensible. "My father died when I was 20, left my mother and me with debts we couldn't pay. William was visiting from Montana. He'd made money in mining and was looking to invest in other businesses back east. He seemed charming then, confident, successful. He offered security for my mother and opportunity for me." She traced the rim of her water glass with one finger. "He promised to support my art, said Montana's landscapes would inspire me. And they did. The land is beautiful beyond anything I could have imagined. But William changed once we were married. Or perhaps he simply revealed who he truly was." "The first time he hurt you," Caleb said quietly, "what did you do?" The question brought back memories Flora had tried to suppress: the shock, the disbelief, the shame. "I convinced myself it was my fault," she admitted, "that I'd provoked him somehow. It's strange how the mind works, isn't it? How we can justify almost anything when the alternative is too painful to accept." Caleb nodded, understanding in his eyes. "My mother did the same, made excuses for my father's behavior, said he was under stress, that he didn't mean it, that he loved us really. When did you stop believing that?" Flora asked. "The night he broke my brother's arm for spilling milk at dinner." Caleb's expression hardened at the memory. "I was 10 years old. That's when I knew some men don't hurt the people they claim to love because of stress or drink or provocation. They do it because something in them is broken, because they enjoy the power it gives them." His insight into William's nature was so accurate that Flora felt tears prick her eyes. "I kept thinking he would change," she whispered, "that if I was just better, more perfect." "It was never about you," Caleb said firmly, reaching across the table to briefly touch her hand. "Men like William and my father, they don't need reasons to be cruel, and they never change." The certainty in his voice was oddly comforting. For years, Flora had carried the weight of William's abuse as her own failure. To have someone so clearly place the blame where it belonged lifted a burden she hadn't realized she was carrying. As they walked back to the boarding house under a sky scattered with stars, Flora felt a strange mixture of emotions: gratitude for Caleb's help, excitement about her journey, fear of the unknown future, and beneath it all, a growing awareness of her companion that she was reluctant to examine too closely. At the door to her room, they paused awkwardly, neither quite knowing how to say goodnight. "What time should I be ready tomorrow?" Flora asked, breaking the silence. 7, Caleb replied. "I'll bring the wagon around. It's not far to the station." Flora nodded, searching for words adequate to express her gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you," she said finally, "for everything. Seeing you free is thanks enough," Caleb assured her. Then, more hesitantly, "Would you write to me? Let me know you've arrived safely." "That you're painting again," the request touched Flora deeply. "Of course, where should I send letters?" "My family has a small ranch outside Sacramento," he explained. "I visit a few times a year. I can give you the address." Inside her room, Caleb wrote the address on a slip of paper, his handwriting neat and precise. As he handed it to her, their fingers brushed, sending an unexpected warmth up Flora's arm. "Good night, Flora," he said softly. "Try to get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." After he left, Flora sat on the edge of the bed, the paper clutched in her hand, thoughts swirling. In less than 24 hours, she would be on a train heading west, leaving behind not just William and his cruelty, but also the man who had helped her escape it. The realization filled her with a complicated sorrow she hadn't anticipated. Morning arrived with gray skies threatening rain. Flora dressed quickly, packing her few possessions with care. Her precious paintings went into the leather case Caleb had purchased, protected from potential damage. At precisely 7, a knock came at her door. Caleb stood in the hallway, hat in hand, his expression somber. Ready? He asked, just as he had at the crossroads outside Willow Creek. Flora nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. This was really happening. In an hour, she would be on her way to San Francisco, to a new life free from William's shadow. They ate a quick breakfast provided by Mrs. Cooper, who pressed a small package of food into Flora's hands for the journey. The older woman embraced her briefly before they left, whispering, "Be brave, child. The hardest part is behind you." The train station was already crowded when they arrived, passengers hurrying to board, steam billowing from the massive engine. Caleb secured Flora's ticket with the conductor, then carried her small bag to the boarding area. "The letter for my sister," he reminded her, patting his pocket. "I'll give it to you before you board." They stood awkwardly amid the bustle of the station, so much left unsaid between them. Flora looked at this man who had risked everything to help her, his job, his safety, perhaps even his life if William discovered his role in her escape. "Why did you really help me?" she asked suddenly, needing to know before they parted. The truth. Caleb's blue eyes met hers, unguarded for the first time since they'd met. "Because from the moment I saw you in the town square trying to hide your bruises beneath paint, I couldn't look away. Because something in me recognized something in you. Because..." He hesitated, then continued more softly, "Because I think in another life we might have been something to each other." The simple honesty of his words stripped away Flora's carefully maintained composure. Tears filled her eyes, spilling down her cheeks unchecked. "Don't cry," Caleb said gently, reaching up to brush a tear from her face. "This isn't an ending, it's a beginning." "All aboard," called the conductor. "Train departing for Sacramento in 5 minutes, all aboard." Passengers around them hurried toward the waiting train. Flora remained rooted to the spot, suddenly reluctant to leave, to say goodbye to perhaps the only person who had truly seen her in years. "You need to board," Caleb urged, pressing the letter into her hand. "Eliza will be waiting in San Francisco. You'll be safe there." "What about you?" Flora asked, her voice barely audible above the station's noise. "Will you be safe if William discovers?" "I can take care of myself," he assured her, "and I won't be in Willow Creek long, just long enough to collect my things." "Where will you go?" A small smile touched his lips. "I might head to California eventually. I hear San Francisco is beautiful this time of year." The whistle blew a final warning. Impulsively, Flora reached up and touched Caleb's cheek, a gesture of intimacy she would never have dared before. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me. For helping me find my courage." "It was always there," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. "You just needed someone to remind you." With a final nod, Flora turned and hurried toward the train, clutching her bag and the precious letter. As she climbed aboard, she looked back to see Caleb still standing where she'd left him, hat in hand, watching her go. The train lurched forward with a hiss of steam, wheels grinding against the tracks. Through the window, Flora watched Helena and Caleb recede into the distance. Tears blurred her vision, but she didn't wipe them away. These were different tears than the ones she'd shed over William's cruelty. These were tears of release, of possibility, perhaps even of hope. For 3 days, the train carried Flora westward, through mountains and valleys, past towns and wilderness. She spent hours watching the changing landscape through her window, sketching in a small notebook Caleb had included with her supplies. The further she traveled from Montana, the lighter she felt, as if each mile put more distance between her and the woman she'd been forced to become. On the 4th day, the train pulled into San Francisco. Flora gathered her belongings with trembling hands, both excited and terrified to have reached her destination. As promised, Eliza Quinn was waiting on the platform, instantly recognizable by her striking resemblance to her brother. The same blue eyes, the same direct gaze, though her features were finer, her dark hair longer. "Flora Adams?" she asked, approaching with a warm smile. "I'm Eliza Morgan, Caleb's sister. Welcome to San Francisco." In the weeks that followed, Flora's life transformed in ways she could never have imagined. Eliza and her husband Thomas welcomed her into their home, a beautiful townhouse near the gallery they operated on Market Street. Thomas, true to Caleb's word, introduced Flora to the Women's Art Collective, where her work was received with enthusiasm. By her 3rd month in the city, Flora had sold 5 paintings through the Morgan Gallery, earning enough to rent a small apartment of her own. She filed for divorce from William, a scandalous move, but one supported by her new friends in the collective, many of whom had similar stories of escape and reinvention. She wrote to Caleb regularly, as promised, detailing her new life, her artistic successes, the freedom she was discovering. His replies came less frequently but were always thoughtful, always encouraging. He had left Willow Creek as planned and was working on his family's ranch outside Sacramento. William, he reported, had indeed been furious upon discovering her escape, but had eventually returned to Helena, presumably to pursue his railroad business interests. In her 6th month in San Francisco, Flora held her first solo exhibition at the Morgan Gallery. Standing amid her paintings' vibrant landscapes of Montana, more expressive and honest than anything she'd created before she felt a sense of achievement that had once seemed impossible. The exhibition was nearly over when a familiar figure appeared in the doorway. Tall, broad-shouldered, hat in hand, Caleb Quinn looked much as he had the day they'd parted at the Helena train station, though perhaps more at ease, less burdened. "Caleb," Flora breathed, moving toward him through the crowd. "You didn't tell me you were coming." His smile was warm, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners. "I wanted to surprise you. Eliza helped arrange it." They stood awkwardly for a moment, months of correspondence between them, yet somehow strangers again in person. "Your work is incredible," Caleb said, gesturing to the paintings surrounding them. "Even more beautiful than I remembered." "Thank you for believing in me," Flora replied simply, "for helping me find my way here." After the exhibition closed, they walked along the waterfront, catching up on the months they'd been apart. Caleb had sold his share of the family ranch, he explained, and was considering settling in California permanently. "I've missed you," he admitted as they watched the sunset over the bay. "More than I expected to." Flora turned to face him, studying the face that had haunted her dreams since Helena. "I've missed you too," she said quietly. "I've thought often of what you said at the train station about us being something to each other in another life." "I remember," Caleb replied, his expression serious. "But Flora, this is another life, the one you've created for yourself, free from William, free from fear." She nodded, understanding his meaning. "Yes, and in this life I get to choose, I get to decide who I want to be and who I want beside me." Slowly, giving him every chance to step away, Flora raised her hand to Caleb's cheek, echoing her gesture from the train station, but now with intention rather than farewell. "I choose you," she said simply. "If you'll have me." Caleb covered her hand with his own, his eyes never leaving hers. "Are you sure, after everything you've been through?" "I've spent months healing," Flora assured him, "finding myself again, and I've discovered something important. Love isn't supposed to hurt. It isn't supposed to diminish you." She smiled, feeling truly free for the first time in years. "I think love is supposed to feel like this, like standing in the light after a long darkness." Caleb's answering smile was radiant as he gently drew her closer. "Like finding home after a long journey," he added softly. When his lips finally met hers, Flora felt none of the fear or obligation that had characterized intimacy with William. Instead, there was warmth, tenderness, and a sense of rightness that brought tears to her eyes. "I don't have to hide anymore," she whispered against his mouth. "Not my bruises, not my dreams, not my heart." "No," Caleb agreed, gathering her more firmly into his arms as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in colors Flora would later capture on canvas. "You never have to hide again." 1 year later, Flora stood in her new studio, watching the morning light stream through the large windows. The small house she and Caleb had purchased on the outskirts of San Francisco offered views of both the bay and the surrounding hills, perfect inspiration for her increasingly sought-after landscapes. Her latest work stood on an easel by the window, a portrait of Caleb with his horse against the Montana sky. It was the first of a series she planned, capturing the journey that had brought her from captivity to freedom, from fear to love. Warm arms encircled her from behind, and Caleb's chin rested lightly on her shoulder. "Another masterpiece," he murmured, surveying the nearly completed painting. Flora leaned back against his chest, savoring his solid presence. Their wedding 3 months earlier had been small but joyful, with Eliza and Thomas standing as witnesses. The band on her finger caught the sunlight, a simple gold circle that represented not ownership but partnership. "I was thinking," Caleb said, his breath warm against her ear, "we might visit Montana next summer. Not Willow Creek," he added quickly, "but the mountains, the places you love to paint." Now that Williams moved to Chicago with that railroad heiress he married. Flora considered the suggestion, surprised to find no fear at the thought of returning to the territory where she had suffered so much. "I'd like that," she decided, "to reclaim those landscapes, to paint them as a free woman." Turning in his arms, she looked up at the man who had first recognized her pain, who had helped her escape it, who now shared her life with a gentleness that still sometimes brought tears to her eyes. "You know what Martha told me once?" she asked, smiling at the memory of her friend with whom she still corresponded regularly. "She said that sometimes people recognize something in each other, something essential." She was right. "She was," Caleb agreed, brushing a strand of hair from Flora's face with a touch so tender it made her heart ache. "From that first day in the town square when I saw you trying to hide your bruises beneath paint, and you told me I didn't have to hide," Flora finished. "That was the moment everything changed. The moment I started believing I deserved better." "You deserved everything," Caleb said simply. As they stood together in the sunlit studio, surrounded by Flora's art, her truth made visible, she marveled at the journey that had brought her here. From a trapped, frightened woman hiding bruises beneath powder to an acclaimed artist building a life on her own terms. From a marriage built on control and fear to one founded on respect and tenderness. "I love you," she whispered, the words still new enough to feel miraculous on her tongue. Caleb's answering smile held all the warmth and promise of the future they were creating together. "And I love you," he replied, bending to kiss her as morning light bathed them both in gold. "Every brave, beautiful part of you."